Maeve, please stop acting like you built something here. You married into this company. You did not build it. Denton Price, 40-year-old husband of Maeve Khaled Price, and the ambitious vice president of client development at Khaled Northern, said those words beneath the chandeliers of the Rideau Grand Ballroom in front of 200 industry guests, board members, city planners, investors, and journalists who had come to celebrate the company's 40th anniversary gala. He said them with a smile, the way a man smiles when he believes the room is already on his side. Maeve Khaled Price, 37-year-old wife of Denton, and the hidden controlling owner of Khaled Northern Development through the Khaled Foundation Trust, a $900 million land and timber firm her mother had built from a single northern property lease, stood beside him in a plain navy dress and said nothing. Around her stood the company her mother had raised from frozen ground. Above the stage hung the Khaled Northern crest, the same interlocking CNN her mother had drawn by hand on a napkin in a diner outside Fort McMurray 30 years ago. Beside Denton stood Calla Ventris, 35-year-old founder of Ventris Interiors Group, Denton's undisclosed business contact, and the woman who had been receiving his private messages for 6 months. She smiled at Maeve with the particular warmth of a woman who believed she had already won. Near the front table sat Rupert Price, 64, Denton's father and Khaled Northern's president of operations, a man who had spent 22 years managing a company he believed was kept alive by Vale family connections and a lucky inheritance. He had never once asked whose name sat at the top of the trust documents that funded every project he approved. Then Denton reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket. Maeve saw his hand move and felt the cold before she understood why. He pulled out the compass. The brass compass was small, old, and engraved on the back with her mother's initials. Gwyneth Khaled had worn it pinned to her coat the day she signed Khaled Northern's first provincial land agreement outside Red Deer in 1987. It was not a decoration. It was the closest thing her mother had to a founding document. The instrument she carried the morning the company's first crew broke ground in -20 weather. The compass she pressed into Maeve's hands the week before she died and said, "Keep this. You'll know when to use it." Maeve had brought it to the gala as part of the heritage display her team assembled in the lobby, a glass case of founding artifacts, photographs, and the original site map for Khaled Northern's first project. She had placed the compass in the case herself that afternoon. She had not left her clutch anywhere near that case. Denton held the compass up under the chandelier light. The brass caught the beam. The room shifted. "My father always told me a man's greatest asset is the company he keeps," Denton said into the microphone, scanning the ballroom with the look of a man delivering a speech he had rehearsed for weeks. "I've decided that what I'm building from here, I should be building it with the right person beside me." He walked down from the stage toward Calla Ventris. He pinned the compass to her lapel. The room erupted in confused murmuring. Cameras flashed. Someone in the back whispered something behind their program. Delia Marsh, 41, Calla's event consultant and confidant, raised her phone without trying very hard to hide it. Oren Ventris, 38, Calla's brother and the struggling co-owner of a mid-sized interior supply firm, watched from a side table with an expression that had not yet decided whether to look proud or afraid. Waverly Price, 33, Denton's younger sister, raised her champagne glass slightly in Maeve's direction, as if toasting a foregone conclusion. Maeve did not scream. She did not reach for the compass. She looked at Denton the way a person looks at something they have been seen carefully from a very long distance. "You have no idea what you just touched," she said. Denton laughed once. "There she is." Rupert did not intervene. Noel Strang, 52, Khaled Northern's finance director, and Rupert's quiet corporate ally looked at the floor. Maeve turned and walked out of the ballroom, not in a hurry, not stumbling. The sound of her heels crossed the marble lobby in a straight, even line until the front doors opened, and the October air came in cold off the river. She stood outside for a long moment under the streetlights. Then she called Marta Killam, 49, her private attorney and the legal counsel for the Khaled Foundation Trust. "Pick up," she said. Marta answered on the second ring. "By morning," Maeve said, "I need the board notified." There was a pause on the other end. Not surprise, something closer to relief. "I'll start the filing now," Marta said. That morning had begun 7 hours earlier, before the sun had cleared the ridge east of the city. Maeve arrived at the Khaled Northern site office at Garrison Crossing before 6. The ground was hard with frost, and the mobile light towers were still running along the equipment perimeter, casting yellow light across machinery and frozen mud. The crew did not start until 7, but site managers arrived early during groundbreaking weeks, and Maeve had always arrived earlier than the managers. She wore her old work coat, the one with the Khaled crest on the chest that most of the newer crew did not recognize. The older ones did. Rufus Hawthorne, 61, Khaled Northern's senior site foreman, and a man who had poured concrete for the company since Gwyneth Khaled ran morning briefings herself, looked up from a clipboard near the equipment shed and removed his hat. "Mrs. Khaled," he said, "not Mrs. Price." He had never called her Mrs. Price on a job site, even after the wedding. Maeve had never corrected him for it. She was there for the annual remembrance. Every year, on the week of the company anniversary, Khaled Northern held a quiet moment before work, began to acknowledge the 3 workers who had died on company projects in the early years, before safety standards were strengthened. Gwyneth Khaled had started the tradition herself in 1991 after a crane failure in the 2nd year of operations. She had paid for the memorial plaque that now traveled with the company, a small bronze rectangle installed each year at the site office door. Most of the current executives did not attend. Denton had never attended once. Maeve placed her hand on the plaque and read all 3 names aloud, the way her mother had taught her. Quietly, without performance, with the specific attention owed to people whose families still lived in the city. Prentice Daly, 46, Khaled Northern's internal audit director, appeared at the edge of the site road just as the remembrance ended. He carried a sealed folder and wore the expression he only wore when numbers had confirmed something he had hoped was wrong. "The Ventris contracts," he said, falling into step beside her. She already knew. He had sent the preliminary summary 3 days earlier, but summaries were not the same as signed copies. Rupert had approved 2 interior development contracts for Ventris Interiors Group without presenting them to the board's vendor selection committee. The contracts, a combined $3.1 million, included an accelerated payment schedule that did not appear in the standard vendor agreement template. Orrin had attended one preliminary vendor meeting personally, introduced by Denton, who had represented himself to the project manager as acting on Rupert's direct authority. Noel had altered the internal budget notes to categorize the first Ventris payment under general project development rather than third-party vendor procurement, bypassing 2 layers of normal review. "How long?" Maeve asked. 7 months, Prentice said. "Since March." Since March, she thought. Since the month Denton had started coming home late on Tuesday evenings and explaining it differently every time she asked. She stopped walking and looked out across the frozen site. In the far distance beyond the equipment perimeter, a ridge of spruce sat dark against the pale sky. Her mother had found that land herself. She had driven Maeve out to see it when Maeve was 12, pointed at the tree line and said, "This is where we'll build the development that proves this company can last." It had lasted. Through recessions and contract disputes, and the 2 years after Gwyneth died when 3 separate parties tried to contest the trust arrangement. It had lasted because Gwyneth had been careful and because Marta had been thorough, and because Maeve had stayed quiet, to know exactly who could be trusted and who needed to be watched. She had married Denton in her 31st year, 2 years after her mother passed. She had used her married name publicly and kept the trust documents out of general circulation. She wanted to know whether Denton would honor her without knowing what she was worth. She had her answer now. "Send everything to Marta by noon," she said. "All of it, don't abbreviate." She stayed by the memorial plaque for one more moment before returning to her car. She read the last name again. Layla Fournier, 29, General Later 2nd, Site 1992. She had been 22 when Layla died. Her mother had taken her to the funeral. "Some things you do not build a company without," her mother had told her that week. "You build with people. You owe them the courtesy of knowing their names." The gala began at 7 and turned against Maeve before 8:30. The ballroom had been dressed in Khaled Northern's colors, gray and deep green, with miniature architectural models at each centerpiece and project photographs along the side walls. It looked, Maeve thought when she arrived, like a room honoring someone else's work. She had come in beside Denton, who spent the first hour speaking to investors without introducing her. He touched her elbow once, near the bar, to guide her out of a conversation he was having with a city development officer. The gesture was automatic. He did not look at her when he did it. Waverley appeared with sparkling water, held out like a peace offering. "You look tired," Waverley said. "I'm fine," Maeve said. "You always say that." Waverley glanced toward the stage. "Dad's planning something for the speeches," Denton asked to add remarks. Maeve looked at the lobby through the open archway, the heritage display, the glass case, the compass at the center, pressed against the velvet backing at an angle that showed the engraving. She had removed the compass from the display before the guests arrived, intending to place it back herself during the heritage remarks. She had stored it in a small grey pouch in her clutch. She had set her clutch down on the corner of the display table for 8, perhaps 10 minutes, while she spoke to the event coordinator about the photograph framing. Denton had walked through that archway during those 10 minutes. She opened her clutch. The grey pouch was there, the compass was gone. Maeve closed the clutch. She did not go looking for Denton. She already understood that what was about to happen was not going to be private. 20 minutes later, she heard Orin Ventris speaking in the coat-check corridor. His voice carried more than he knew. If Denton presents Calla with the founder's compass in front of the board tonight, Orin said, everyone reads it the same way. Succession. Nobody questions it. Rupert's been in that seat long enough. They'll assume the family has chosen. Maeve stood with one hand against the corridor wall. She did not cry, the feeling was colder than that. She had spent 6 years protecting Denton from his own smallness, watched him feel uncertain in rooms full of people who had more, and offered him steady ground instead of pity. She had thought, if she gave him enough room, he would eventually stand up without leaning. She had been wrong. He had not grown into himself. He had only looked for a taller woman to stand beside instead. She stepped back into the ballroom. She stood in the crowd and watched Rupert take the microphone first, speaking about legacy and operational vision and the Vale name as if the words themselves paid the bills. She watched Denton step onto the stage without being announced. She watched Denton reach into his jacket pocket. And then she watched the compass catch the chandelier light and become something it was never meant to be. She said what she said. She walked out. She called Marta from the front steps in the October cold. In the car alone, she let herself cry for exactly the length of time it took to understand that the grief was real and that it did not change what needed to happen next. Then she dried her face and told Marta what to prepare. The lobby screens changed at 7:15 the following morning. One moment they showed gala photographs, coloured northern crests, project renders, the toasting shot of Rupert with city councillors. The next moment every screen went dark. Then white letters appeared. Emergency board session. Contraling Sheraton present. The receptionist stood up. A project manager froze mid-step. Engineers near the coffee station looked at one another. Denton arrived at 7:23 with the confidence of a man expecting an apology. He read the screens and his jaw tightened. The trust doesn't come to sessions, he said. It never comes to sessions. Calla arrived behind him, slightly breathless. The compass was no longer on her lapel. Marta's office had enclosed it in a legal evidence pouch at 11 the previous night, catalogued as removed company property under the Callard Foundation Trust's asset protection provisions. Rupert arrived through the parking structure entrance with Noel close behind him, already speaking in low tones. He stopped when he saw the screens. The private elevator opened. Orford Keane, 58, Callard Northern's board secretary, stepped out first. Prentice followed with the audit folders. Marta came last. And then Maeve. She did not look at Denton when she came out. She did not look at Calla. She walked through the lobby at an even pace, the kind that comes from knowing exactly where you are going in a building you have known since your mother sketched it on a whiteboard in 1998. Older employees straightened. A senior drafter who had been with the company since the second Northern phase quietly set down his coffee. Rufus Hawthorne, who had come to the main office that morning for a supply meeting, removed his hat. Denton stepped into her path. "Maeve," he said, "what is this?" She stopped. She looked at him the way you look at something you have been deciding about for a long time. "You pinned my mother's compass on another woman inside my company," she said, "and now you are asking me what this is." The lobby heard every word. "You're the board liaison, Maeve. You do not run operations." "No," Marta said, stepping forward with the quiet authority of someone who had been waiting years for this exact moment. "Mrs. Callard Price does not run operations." A pause. "Mrs. Callard does." The lobby went still. Rupert looked at the archive folder under Maeve's arm. He looked at her face. He looked at the Callard crest on the folder, the one Gwyneth had designed, the one embossed on every founding document in the company's history, the one he had walked past on the boardroom wall for 22 years. His expression changed the way a room changes when the lights go out, not all at once, in pieces. The boardroom session lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Maeve sat at the head of the table. Every board member was present. Orford Keane read the session authority into the record. Carries Lund, 61, Callard Northern's lead independent board member, recognized Maeve's controlling shareholder authority without hesitation. Prentice opened the first audit file. Denton sat down halfway through because his legs did not seem to want to keep him upright. The Ventris contracts appeared on the screen first. Then Noel's altered budget classifications. Then Rupert's vendor approval records, signed under project development codes that did not apply to the contract type. Then 6 months of calendar entries. Private meetings between Denton and Calla, expensed in the company system under client relationship management. Calla did not speak until the vendor call transcript appeared on the screen. In August, she had placed a call through Callard Northern's project coordination line. The line carried a standard vendor disclosure notice. She had not known that. She had told her brother on that call that Denton had promised a preferred vendor arrangement, and that the wife was not a concern. "I was told she was a silent spouse," Calla said. Her voice had lost the polish it carried the night before. Maeve looked at her once. "You were told what my husband believed." Noel tried to frame his altered records as administrative simplification. Marta placed the original unaltered records beside the revised versions and let the difference speak. Orin tried to recategorize the Ventris contracts as standard business development. Prentice countered with the timeline. Their alliance unraveled between sentences, each one exposing more than the documents had. The final file was a board portal entry written by Rupert 4 months earlier, found in the audit sweep. It read, "Denton should be positioned as the operational successor in this anniversary cycle. Maeve's role in governance communications can be transitioned out. The trust has always been passive and can remain so." He had written it, believing the trust would stay silent forever. "You were eating at a table my mother built," Maeve said. "She did not raise her voice, and you spent 4 months trying to write me out of it." Rupert stood. "I was protecting the company's operational future." "You were protecting your son's ambition," Maeve said. "They are not the same thing." The room did not move. She picked up the resolution Marta had prepared and read it without ceremony. Rupert Price suspended from all duties, pending full investigation. Noel Strang removed from all finance systems. Ventris contracts frozen. All pending bids from Ventris-affiliated entities suspended. Denton Price's vice president designation, client relations access and Callard Northern building credentials revoked. Orin Ventris barred from company premises. Waverley Price's advisory listing removed. Delia Marsh's recordings preserved for legal review. Each consequence arrived clean. No shouting, no dramatics, just the sound of decisions being made by the person who had always had the right to make them. When it was done, Rupert put one hand on the table. "I managed those operations for 22 years, he said. "Yes," Maeve said, "you managed them." Security processed his access badge at the boardroom door. The reader blinked red. Denton waited until the room had mostly emptied. He found Maeve in the corridor outside. "I didn't know," he said. His voice sounded different without the room behind it. Smaller, the way he had always been afraid of being. "I know," she said. He exhaled. "Then why?" "Because you didn't need to know," Maeve said. "You needed to be decent without knowing. That was the only thing I ever asked of you." She left him in the corridor with the divorce filing. Marta had prepared, and the sound of Callard Northern continuing to function around him, phones ringing, printers running, boots crossing the lobby, a company that had never needed him in order to exist. The compass was returned to the heritage display case 3 weeks later, after the legal preservation period ended. Prentice had it cleaned and the velvet backing replaced. The case was moved from the event lobby into the permanent heritage corridor outside the board suite. A new plaque was installed beneath it. It read, "Brass Compass carried by Gwyneth Callard at the signing of Callard Northern's first provincial land agreement, 1987. Returned to company custody by Maeve Callard Price, controlling owner, Callard Foundation Trust." Maeve stood in front of it on a Tuesday morning in November, before the building had filled. The corridor was quiet. Through the window at the end of the hall, the first snow of the season was coming down across the city in slow, even sheets. She had not worn the compass again. Not yet. It belonged here for now in this corridor, where people who worked in the building could see it every time they passed. It had been taken as a prop in someone else's story. She would not let it become a symbol of what she had reclaimed. She would let it become what it had always been, proof that someone had shown up in the cold, found the ground solid enough, and decided to begin. Rufus appeared at the end of the corridor with a hard hat under one arm and a site report in his hand. He was heading to the morning briefing for the Garrison Crossing project, which had continued without interruption through all of it. He stopped when he saw her. "Mrs. Callard," he said. She nodded. He looked at the compass case, then back at her. She'd have wanted you to keep it on you. Maybe, Maeve said, when the time is right. He went to his meeting. Maeve stayed a moment longer in the corridor. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the city the way the season always did, covering construction sites and memorial plaques and frozen ground waiting for spring. The kind of snow that changed nothing about what was underneath. Khaled Northern's morning shift was starting. She could hear the building come alive around her, the way it had come alive every morning, since her mother decided that a piece of northern land and a company name were enough to begin with. They had been. Maeve picked up her briefcase and walked toward the boardroom, where the day's first agenda was already waiting. She did not walk in like a storm. She walked in like the weather had always been hers to read. If this story moved you, subscribe to Broken Pledge Tales for more. And leave a comment with the word honor if you believe a quiet woman's silence should never be mistaken for permission.